So hi, everyone. Nice to see you. I see you're in a beautiful old room. I am in DC right now, so joining you from the East Coast. So let me start off by just giving you a little bit of background on myself, and then we'll kind of move to the topics at hand. So again, I'm Dr. Marisol Morales. I serve as the Executive Director of the Carnegie Elective classifications with the American Council on Education. Prior to joining this role, I was a Vice President for Network Leadership at Campus Compact. And before that, I think when I first met Julia, I was at the University of Laverne in Southern California. And folks from your institution, Julia, and others joined us for a training that we were having out in Southern California. And so I've been, in my own research and my own work, very interested in sort of how HSIs are looking at community engagement, particularly in this idea of engaging sameness, right? So sometimes, or oftentimes, we send our students to communities that are their own communities or similar to their own communities. And what does that engagement look like, especially when our field itself has been, a lot of the early literature has focused on sending sort of white, middle class, privileged students to marginalized communities. So what happens when the service is happening in one's own community? How do we as practitioners have to think about the assignments, the engagement, the ways we speak about communities, and be more reflective in our own curriculum and understandings about the ways that particularly Latino students are seeing this engagement happening. And so in my role at Campus Compact, I did a lot of capacity building with folks from institutions across the country and thinking about DEI and community engagement. And in my own research have really focused on what community engagement looks like for Latinx students at Hispanic Serving Institutions. And so that's part of how I'm coming to you here today. I myself am Puerto Rican, born and raised in Chicago. And as a student, it was really a community engagement class for me, the end of my sophomore year in my own community, that transformed my college experience. And so, and I think, really has defined the trajectory of my career and my own activism. And so I see this from a really personal lens, the possibilities that community engagement has for our students. I have a son who's 19 years old in college and not feeling connected, and the ways that these experiences can really help to connect students meaningfully to understanding themselves and their communities and some of the broader issues that are impacting. So just, really briefly from my own research, I found, and I don't know if I can share my screen. If you can enable me to share my screen, I'll share a couple of the models that I came up with through some.
Be able to.
Let's see.
We're working on it.
Okay, no problem. But I really, part of what I learned in speaking to students was, what were some of the aspects impacting their engagement. So what were the themes and significant factors impacting their engagement? And then how did that translate into the way they saw themselves in this work? And then the way that we as practitioners need to think about our own practice when we're serving this group of students. Perfect. So let me start off with this. This is a slideshow. All right, can you all see that? No, okay.
We see your desktop.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That is a scary scene. Hold on. Like, don't judge me.
It was really neat.
So, some of the things I wanted to know, let me just actually start here. These are some of my research questions. How were these courses, these engagement courses, impacting the kind of college going experiences for these students? What were they seeing? What were they experiencing? What was happening? And, looking at the community cultural capital of these Latinx students and how it's being activated in these courses and the ways that they saw themselves in the curriculum, and whether or not the students were connecting these experiences to the long history of community engagement, particularly in ethnic studies, right, with Latino faculty in local Latino communities. And so some of the things that we were hearing from students were the ways that they were able to sort of find themselves through this work, find their passions, and opportunities for sort of agency and action to come up. The other thing that we were seeing is, the ways that they could use their own experiences to help their communities or bring those experiences that maybe their family had experienced or they had seen in their own lives into these really activist and community-oriented ways of engaging, right? And so these sort of pathways to leadership and engagement. And then the ways that even working with faculty who were not Latino, they could make these connections with other communities or see the connections that were happening through faculty who really facilitated inclusive environments and what that meant to do that and how they could situate their own experiences into experiences that maybe others have had, and really thinking about like where does solidarity come into play. And so based on this, there were some themes that I came up with and some significant factors that impacted students. So this idea of awareness, agency, and action. And so, how do these community engagement courses provide awareness? So provide some language for understanding the situations and experiences they and their families and communities have experienced. How does it instill in them a sense of agency, this ability to actually, do something about it, and then opportunities for action to take place where they could actually see the translation of their awareness and agency into something tangible with significance in the community. Another sort of theme that came out was this positive interaction with faculty, and this rested on experiences that faculty were sharing kind of their own experiences in their communities. They were sharing things that they themselves were maybe passionate about, or as little as working and making the effort to pronounce a student's name correctly, and something they had never experienced in their own kind of educational experience, right? And so this positive interaction with faculty also helped facilitate their engagement experiences and made them more connected to both the sort of subject matter of the class as well as the engagement that they were experiencing. This idea of engaging sameness, so this personal connection to the service. So you had students who, were maybe working at the same women's organization that dealt with domestic violence that their mother had sought services from. So there was this personal connection, or they were helping to do translation and in a community, in their own community, and being able to share their experiences as college students. And so there was this different connection, this personal connection to the service that gave them a sense of identity and connection to seeing themselves as leaders within this or agents of change. And then the fact that the way they viewed this engagement was really upliftment for their communities, that their participation in this, their representation, their ability to sort of be a face to this really had an impact on uplifting the community. The other piece was these significant factors that impacted their service as well. And so personal familial trauma and how that either connected to aspects of the service or made them understand the service engagement work differently, constraints, things, strict parents, or limitations because they had to work full time and go to school full time and try to fit in community engagement, and then previous experience with service. So whether it was through a high school service learning requirements, service that they had done in the community because of their faith communities or their own kind of political activism, It wasn't like their experience with engagement wasn't happening for the first time in college. They actually brought a lot of this capital, right? This cultural capital with them. And so they were able to expand on that through the experiences that they were receiving in this classroom, in the classroom. And then thinking about this as sort of the prism of liberatory engagement. And when we think about prisms, what a prism does is help filter white light and let us see sort of all the colors, right? And so if we think about that as an analogy for this work, how do we think about this prism for liberatory engagement as a way to think about the ways that are filter out the white light, filter out the sort of whiteness of academia, and think about the ways that our diverse students, particularly in this case, Latino students, are going to experience our community engagement, taking into account these aspects, and how do we both shape the experiences, assignments in ways that really are able to provide opportunities for these students to see themselves as leaders, to engage personally with this, to tap into their own community cultural wealth, and see their communities as ones of knowledge and value, and really an appreciative kind of lens to the way we do engagement. And then how are we cognizant of some of the sort of limitations or impacts that may affect students, and have the flexibility to adapt and adjust our the community engagement experiences with those things in mind. So really, as we're looking at sort of practice, how do we engage in asset-based critical engagement? So thinking about the way that community cultural wealth, being student-focused, shows up in the classroom, and how do we develop assignments and materials that really highlight what they already bring into this. So sort of an asset-based way of looking at our students. How do we utilize asset-based community development as an appreciative way of looking at the contributions and the assets of the community? How do we apply sort of critical service learning in our courses to think about the broader kind of social impact and relationships that communities and universities have, particularly through the intersection of our courses, to connect to like broader critical perspectives on what's happening and the reasons why they're happening. And then as faculty and community engagement professionals, how do we apply, or how do we engage our own applied critical leadership to the ways that we engage in our classroom? And so how do we lead with authenticity? How do we create safe spaces for our students? How do we create these classrooms that invite students to share, students to connect, and to build understanding of themselves and each other? And so I share this because I think that sort of the days of having a one-size-fit-all assignment for our students, especially diverse students, we should sort of put that at the side. And so how do we create these diverse experiences, thinking about all of these aspects, and be able to then serve our students in ways that support their own development, but also tap into what our role as a Hispanic serving institution means to serve our Latinx students and the communities that they come from, and really see our courses as pathways for both their leadership development, as well as understanding sort of the broader socio-political, economic circumstances that have us kind of where we're at today. And particularly as I think HSIs, this has implications on things like our policies, how we recruit faculty and staff, the kind of faculty development we engage in, the kind of community partnerships we develop, and ultimately how we plan, implement, and execute our community engagement courses. I know it was like a quick and dirty run through. I want to sort of be mindful of time, but I think what I will say is that when we give students the opportunity to see their own communities, especially from an academic context, not as sort of broken, but as spaces of creativity, commitment, activism, history, ways that they may have not engaged in this sort of thinking about their community, or particularly media doesn't always show their communities in that way. Then there's a different sense of imagination that we can create for our students, not only of their own communities, but of themselves. And really that is the role, I think, of a Hispanic Serving Institution, as we're looking at what our responsibility is to serve the students that we have now, not the students we may have had, 15, 20 years ago, and the students we will continue to have in the future. So it takes an institution really thinking about itself and owning that HSI identity, and how you embed it within courses, how you embed it within policies. I've been exploring this kind of concept of bureaucratic violence, and how do we sort of really put every policy and procedure that we have in place at an institution against this test of, is this creating violence? Is this creating barrier? And how do we reassess that in order to create opportunities for thriving for our students, our faculty, our staff, and the communities that work with us? And I see something wagging its tail. Am I wrong? Okay.
Marisol, can you speak to a little bit, because I'm trying to also get people excited about doing the Carnegie application for the community engagement, the
Yeah.
reclassification. So how do you see that supporting this work?
Absolutely. So, I'm no stranger to the heftiness of the application. I led the process at University of Laverne, and I also hear complaints from institutions about the work. But what I will say, and we often say that really the process is the prize. It's an institutional self-study that really gives you an opportunity to look deeply across the institution at the way that you're doing community engagement work. It, in some ways, is positive force for bringing disparate parts of the institution together to really reflect and think about this, and how you're connecting the work. And I think it also provides like opportunities and points of pride for you to be like, oh, actually, we're doing more than we thought we were doing. And actually, through this process, you get to collect the diverse stories that are happening and then put them against the Carnegie definition. And so we often tell campuses is like, collect all the stories you can and put them against the definitions, the ones that like meet the definition, include those in your narrative. The ones that don't, send them to marketing or highlight them, but it's good work that's happening that oftentimes it's, we're doing it on our own, or we're, only a few people know about it. So it really gives a campus, I think, a way to kind of mobilize around this important aspect of their mission, and think about the ways that you can leverage these stories, this work, to highlight, what your connection to the community is. How does this support grant projects that you might be interested in pursuing? How do you use this to change the narrative about higher education, and its value to communities, right? So, for us, it's really, we know it's a cumbersome process, but what you get from being able to have this really focused way of bringing people together and thinking about how it aligns with institutional mission, strategic plans, accreditation, those sorts of things, allows you to really bring to light the things that you've been working at collectively, and leverage those in ways that really tell a different story about your institution. We use the Carnegie process to create awards and recognition for our institution that it had never had before, that highlighted the important aspects of the 4 pieces of our mission. And we were able to give awards and recognize alumni and recognize faculty and staff and community partners and students, and bring the community together. And it's a feel-good moment for like, oh, we're doing a lot to have impact in the Inland Empire, and this is a way for us to bring the whole university together. I will say that, institutions leverage it in different ways. They leverage it as a way to encourage changes in the tenure and promotion guidelines, particularly around recognizing engaged scholarship. They have used it to pursue NSF funding. You know, many of the federal institutions are looking for community partnerships as part of their work, or the work that the grantees are doing. And so this is a perfect place where these stories can live. And then I think that, you know, particularly for the institution, it's a way to utilize this, especially if there's support for this work, and recruiting faculty and staff and recruiting students. We know from the research and from the data that more faculty of color and female faculty do community engagement. And so if that is a targeted group for recruitment, it helps in being able to share those stories, especially if there's been work in the TMP guidelines for that scholarship and work to be recognized. For students who are already bringing, right, we know that students are coming in with previous experience with community engagement and service and activism. It is also a way to recruit those students and give them something to feel connected to, especially our COVID kids who have struggled for a sense of belonging. You know, this really gives you an opportunity to showcase where they can belong at your institution.
Well, thank you so much. I have to wrap things up here.
Absolutely. I'll be in the Bay Area soon, so I'll connect with
Oh,
you.
okay, well, let me know.
Yeah.
Maybe we can
Yeah.
do something in person. That would be
Yeah.
great.
I'll be there later this month.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.